You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Today we put on our brewing caps and propose 8 new deck lists for Grixis Week, featuring Corpse Appraiser, Maestros Ascendancy, Humble Defector, Rielle the Everwise, and much more. We'll be fined trophies by joining the Maestros. Find out this week on Faithless Brewing, and hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. I am David Robertson, coming to you from the Twin Cities, and I am joined, as always, by the CEO of the Faithless Brewing Podcast. He is Cavedan Online. He's Cavedan in our hearts. Daniel Shriver, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing well, David. Good to be here with you again on this fine Monday.
Yes, tremendous. The week has begun. Why enjoy a weekend when you can work for a living?
So we're here for, this is our 29th episode of Streets of New Capenna season. As I say that, it sounds preposterous. We've been in this set for a while now. I did not think that there would be that many cards to really dig into from Streets of New Capenna. We've been dipping our toes into some non-Capenna cards over the last few weeks. Today, we are going back to the true essence of the set, which is shards. Or what do they call them now? Crime families?
Yeah, exactly. The Corleones.
Yes. So we got a theme week here. We are going to be taking a look at the Maestros. So we're going to take a look at some Grixis decks and also hear from David about some of the stuff that he has been playing lately. Because it's been a while, right? I mean, you've been busy. I know you've been on vacation lately, but vacation means more time to play MPGO.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just a reminder, if you enjoy the show and you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. Join at whatever level you feel comfortable with, and you get access to the Discord, which has a bunch of people dropping deck ideas, talking about results, hashing over specific cards, sideboard options. You get to support the show. There's a bunch of fun perks. There's a bunch of merchandise. And as we mentioned on the Friday show, you can vote for the new co-brew card that will be out by the time you listen to this with the Serum Visions podcast.
Yes, exactly. We just recorded that episode yesterday. And there's a lot of spicy ones on the ballot this time around. So look for that episode coming out later this week, and if you want to get in on the action and throw us a little support in the process, come sign up for the Patreon. We would love to see you there. Other stuff going on, a reminder that we do have a new YouTube channel. I haven't updated much gameplay lately because I've been traveling myself and didn't have my equipment with me, but I have a league with fight rigging going up and also a league with Moderation Brew that we talked about a little while back. If you want to see those decks in action so that you can actually cut through the veil, and instead of just having to take my word for it about why this card doesn't work, you can see for yourself that actually, the card actually did work. It's just that Caveman punted for 3 rounds in a row and didn't mention it. The truth is going to be on YouTube, so check that out. And, while you're at it, give us some feedback. Let us know what we can improve, because we just want to make this content helpful for you.
The truth is out there, is what you're saying.
It is.
It can only be found on YouTube.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Maestros, or Grixis. This is Xander's clan, and Xander, he had a rough go of it, as far as I understand. He was murked by Obnixilus within the first day of the storyline.
So was he like the recently deceased Jimmy Kahn?
I don't know.
James Kahn? James Kahn played Sonny Corleone, who was killed in the famous toll booth shooting scene in The Godfather. Just passed away a week ago.
Oh, spoiler alert. Jeez.
R.I.P. Jimmy Kahn. Loved him. And if anyone hasn't seen Thief, that is just an awesome movie. If you like Heat, which a lot of people have seen, Thief is Michael Mann's first movie, and James Caan plays a professional thief. Awesome, awesome movie.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Look how they massacred my boy. Xander was that boy, apparently. He has a nice lounge. Let's just focus on, nice little man cave there.
Exactly. So the Grixis Triumph Xander's Lounge. If there's a unifying thread for this segment, it probably is the new land. Because there isn't necessarily like a specific card from Grixis that's really captured our imaginations. But we're going to do our best. David, you got a couple lists drawn up here. We'll take a look at those and also check in on some of the Grixis brews that have been doing well in the queues lately that you might not have seen if you have not been tracking developments very closely.
Yeah, so the first list we have here, a card I have some interest in and have toyed around with a little bit, is Maestros Ascendancy. So that's the Grixis Ascendancy, and it has a lot of text, like all the new cards do. But it says that once during each of your turns, you can cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. You still have to pay mana for it. And the cost is you have to sacrifice a creature. So the reason I'm kind of interested in this card is we've seen people start to play a lot of Young Pyromancer again. There's been just straight up blue-red, more controlling builds with Young Pyromancer. And we've seen some sacrifice themes return. Like there's a full-on red-black sacrifice deck. There have been people in the sort of blue-red Xerox space adding the sort of claim to the firstborn with some sac effects. Maestros Ascendancy is kind of this hidden sac effect. It's a free sacrifice effect every turn of the game. It's a card advantage engine against control if you just want to keep like throwing thought seizes at them. It turns all of your claim to the firstborns. There's no spell that your opponent can counter or whatever. You just get to sacrifice the creature to cast whatever spell you want from your graveyard. So I think it's just a nice addition that Maestros Ascendancy is actually just a worthwhile card. If you have a Young Pyromancer or Ledger Shredder in play, or a Sedgemoor Witch, which I have, or an Improbable Alliance, as I have as a one of, you just want to keep that flow of spells going, right? Every turn with Ledger Shredder, you can find a second spell that allows you to loot some more. Every time you cast a spell with Maestro's Ascendancy triggering Young Pyromancer, that puts another creature in play. In general, I've seen people playing like 4 Sedgemoor Witch. That seems like a lot. We were, less than impressed during Sedgemoor Witch week. And the reason is that 3 mana to play a spell that dies to 1 mana spells, and there's a million of them, only matters if you're putting a lot of pressure on their life total, which this list does not, and most token lists do not. And the extra turn to play the card hurts a lot, right? Because you don't want to play Sedgemoor Witch unless you can cast a spell, so we're really talking about a 4 mana play. I think that Maestro's Ascendancy actually is a better value play long term. It is more susceptible to graveyard hate, but it also is much better against decks that are good at killing creatures, which many decks are. I think as the format's become very polarized again between control and all these creature decks, you see people having a lot of success basically just playing like mono removal. That's all their deck does. And mono removal decks are really going to struggle to beat a card like Maestro's Ascendancy. In fact, it's almost impossible for them to beat. If you just think of like red-black, like how are they going to beat this card?
Well, I'm starting to see what you're saying, but I was going to ask you to sell me harder on Maestro's Ascendancy because I just don't see it, right? Like, I initially didn't even realize that you had to sacrifice a creature to activate this thing. I understand why you have to do... you laugh, but, like, Kess doesn't require you to sacrifice a creature, and Kess is not good. So why would Maestro's Ascendancy, which is, like, worse than Kess, be a desirable effect? You're asking me to go into 3 colors, take a whole turn off, and then I'm not even getting card advantage necessarily. I'm trading a creature, which I may not even have, for a spell that maybe wasn't that powerful.
Well, Kess is not legal in Pioneer. If it was, I think it would be pretty good. So that's the first thing. I'm not proposing playing Maestro's Ascendancy in any format where Kess is legal.
But, like, isn't this just a souped-up Dreadhorde Arcanist?
It's a Dreadhorde Arcanist that dodges Strangle and Push and Anger of the Gods. All these cards are good against the rest of your deck, right? And you don't want to play... You just talked about it. I forget what list you're playing. You're like, whatever the enchantment was... Oh, the enchantment that makes 1/1 spirits when you cast enchantments. You're like, it sucks. Every time I play out all my enchantments, I play into Wrath of God.
Yes.
Or I play into Anger. This doesn't make you do that. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? I'm actually sacking my creatures to Thoughtseize you. I don't need to invest heavily in the board per se.
Gotcha. So it's also limited to once per turn, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you can't go like Claim the Firstborn, take their creature, sack it to the Ascendancy, recast Claim the Firstborn, take another creature, sack that to the Ascendancy.
No.
You can do it once, though.
Yes.
That's pretty cute. Yeah, so, I mean, do you have a good read on Claim the Firstborn? We talked about Ob Nixilis a couple weeks ago and, like, why it's made a somewhat of a comeback in Pioneer, and both Emmy and myself felt like Claim the Firstborn is such a swingy, powerful card that, like, if Claim is good, then I could see how that deck, the Rakdos Sack deck with Ob, might be, like, powerful again. Now, here we're playing 4 Claim with a much more muted sacrifice theme, but there's still 4 Claim.
Well, we have 4 Village Rites, 2 Eaten Alive, 1 Deadly Dispute, 1 Maestros Ascendancy, so I think that's a lot of sacrifice effects.
Well, it becomes like an A plus B kind of thing where, I mean, how many effects is that? Like 8? 8 sacrifice effects?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, to support 4 Claims. So you're not always going to have it, is what I'm saying.
No, and I think that's where the sort of Ledger Shredder comes in, right? In matchups where it's not good, Shredder can loot it away, hopefully, and then you have your consider opt as to find your missing piece, right? So you have sort of the Xerox ability to still like fly through your deck and hopefully find one of the combo pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the proof seems to be on your side, right? A version of Grixis Pyromancer with Sedgemoor Witch did well last weekend. I think DemonicTutors played it to a top 32 in the challenge, and I saw another player at 5-0 with their list. They had a similar ratio of like, okay, here's the 4 Claims plus the 2 Eaten Alives, 3 Village Rites, 2 Deadly Disputes. They were using Plum the Forbidden instead of the Maestros Ascendancy. I'm not sure if I like Plum. I think that card is kind of underperformed. And they have the 1 Ob Nixilis main deck.
Yeah, that's a modded out version of somebody 5-0'd with the 4 Shredder, 4 Sedgemoor Witch, 4 Young Pyromancer like 3 weeks ago. And I think people have been monkeying around with the list since. They were not playing Ob Nixilis main. Ob Nixilis is like your hedge. Like, this deck is really good against other aggro decks. The Claim the Firstborn, again, I think you can sell out against aggro decks. And that you just see a lot of decks that are just like black-red mono removal, Grixis mono removal. If you're just willing to punt your combo and control matchups, you can crush all the aggro decks if you want. And then you just, like, all right, I'm 3-2 in this league. I played blue-white twice. Like, there's just nothing to do about it. This is trying to kind of go in the middle, right? Like, we're at least main decking some Thoughtseizes. A Maestros Ascendancy at least gives you a shot against, these Wrath of God type of effects. It's how much do you want to maybe it's better to just be good against aggro. You'll always at least 3-2 because you'll play 3 aggro decks a league, but your chances of 5-0ing are pretty low. Unless, again, you get to play aggro decks all the time, which sometimes you do, and then it feels awesome. Because you're like, oh, you could play 4 Push and multiple Strangle and 2 Dreadbore and, 4 Graveyard Trespasser and 2 Kalitas.
Yeah, that's the other thing that surprises me about both your list and the one that I 5-0'd earlier is if I'm in Grixis, I assume I'm really safe against small creatures because I have Push, Strangle, whatever. And then you look real close and it's like, actually, they don't have those cards, right? Like the one from the 5-0s is not playing any Strangle and they're not even playing any Fatal Push. They're relying on Eaten Alive in the main deck, which it's cool that Eaten Alive can kill Planeswalkers. Actually, it exiles them, so it's a little more permanent if you're trying to kill like a Phoenix or something like that. Or if you're paired against blue-white, Eaten Alive can get you out of like a Narset or a Teferi or something like that, or a Wandering Emperor. So it's like a better card in some situations than Fatal Push, but I'm just like shocked to see no Fatal Push at all in that build. Now, in your build, David, you've got a mix, right? A more balanced mix. 2 Eaten Alive, 2 Fatal Push.
Well, I think the interaction of Claim the Firstborn and Eaten Alive, again, is so good against all the creature decks. Like, it's against humans, against spirits. You claim the Firstborn, their creature, and then attack them. Do they want to block and trade? No, they take 2 damage or whatever. Okay. Now I Eaten Alive, sack your creature, kill your creature. The game is functionally over. Like, these decks, Spirits needs multiple creatures in play to be threatening. Humans needs multiple creatures in play to be threatening. For 2 mana, we've just ended the game. This interaction is very powerful, and it gives you, like, crazy tempo positive plays on the first 3 turns of the game without having to play any sweepers to beat all these small creatures decks.
So you think that kind of 1-2 punch is more powerful than just like, all right, you play a 1-drop, I push it. You play a 2-drop, I push it.
Well, I don't believe all the way there, which is what these people do. They're not even playing push. I am a coward. These guys have balls out there. I would still like to play some Fatal Push, especially in a deck with all these sack effects. Like Flashing Back Push with Maestros Ascendancy always gets 4 drops. I'm a little nervous about Grease Fang, which I've started to play a bit more. The Claim the Firstborn interactions are not as good there. So, I like to kind of split the difference a little bit. But, I think other people are much more comfortable, or maybe don't think about, like, just having terrible, terrible matchups, just being like 20% to win or less against like 20% of the field. And they can just live with that. I hate that. I hate like starting a league and you just happen to play your bad matchup and it's just like, fuck. Like, yeah, I just have no chance here. But people just like that red-green ramp deck that just couldn't beat any combo or control ever. And it's just like, okay, I just hope I dodge it. Like, I can't live with that, but I think other people maybe are doing the math correctly in a way that I can't, right? I'm emotionally invested in having some chance against everybody. They're just saying, like, look, I'm just going to 4-1 a bunch of leagues, and I'll just have no chance in that 5th match. And sometimes that 5th match will be another matchup that's good, and I'm going to 5-0.
So last question about this list here. I noticed that in your mana base, you're not playing any of the Triomes. Is it because you feel like comfortable with the mana as it is, with just Pathways and Shocks and Spire Bluff Canals?
Yeah, no double mana symbol for anything. No 2 of each color required. And even our 1-drops are mixed up, so we can play a pathway on blue and a pathway on black and still double spell, right? We can consider into push. We can claim into village rights. So, yeah. I think the Triome thing was overblown. Very few decks, as we pointed out at the time, were playing Triomes. The format's only gotten faster since then. I think maybe playing 1 or 2 Triomes, if you're going longer as a control deck, is probably fine, but I don't know that you need to do that. It's also telling most of the control decks are exactly 2 colors, blue-black, blue-white. No one's actually splashing for the 3rd color. It's not quite worth it. So I don't think you need to play Triomes in this deck. In a deck that's playing Consider and Opt and a bunch of 1-mana interaction, and then all your 2-drops want you to spend all your mana. Young Pyromancer rewards you for spending your mana. Ledger Shredder rewards you for spending your 3rd mana. There's not a good time to play that tap land.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the mana looks very clean and smooth. I'm just worried if there's like a turn where I actually need 2 blue and I only have 1 because, I played a black pathway and a red pathway.
And there are some dual lands here, right? Where it's not all pathways. I think I've got 11.
Yeah.
10, something like that. With a couple fast lands and, 5, 6 shocks. 6 to 8 shocks, I feel like, is like kind of the right number.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. All right, so that is a token-based Grixis list. Young PZ, Sedgemoor Witch, and a sacrifice theme. The next list you have here, well, it looks at first glance like Rakdos Midrange. I see Blood Tithe Harvesters, I see Bonecrusher Giants, I see Graveyard Trespassers, Thought Season Push, right? The staples of black that lets you keep pace with the power of the format. But from there, it gets a little more off the beaten path. I see 4 Tenacious Underdog, a card that, some decks play 2 copies. Okay, so we're playing all 4, so there must be something we really like about it here. 3 copies of Kaito Shizuki. I think you've sung the praises of Kaito in various lists. 2 copies of the Royal Scions. Very interesting 3-mana Planeswalker. The +1 draws and discards, or the other +1 gives +2/+0 First Strike and Trample until end of the turn. And 4 Heart of Kiran. 2-mana vehicle, 4/4 flying vigilance, cruise for 3, that is, you can tap a 3-power creature to crew it, or, more powerfully, you can just remove a loyalty ability from a planeswalker to crew the Heart of Kiran on offense or defense.
Yeah, this isn't like a thought experiment of mine. So I was thinking, like, what cards have been vexing me lately? And it's like Supreme Verdict, Ledger Shredder, Strangle. Heart of Kiran's actually pretty good against all of them. It's good against the Spirits deck in general. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Heart of Kiran, 2 mana play, so it gets underneath all the counter magic. It dodges a ton of commonly played removal, like Blue-Red really has a hard time getting rid of it. Kaito is an interesting card, right? So now, if I follow that up with Kaito, I'm actually super resistant to any sweepers and sorcery speed removal. And Kaito just draws a card every turn for the rest of the game. It -1s to make Heart of Kiran a creature, Heart of Kiran attacks, and I +1 Kaito to draw a card. Then it phases out. So even if they have Strangle, I get a whole nother card out of it, at least. Heart of Kiran can be used to block, although it doesn't have to block Kaito. Kaito phases out. And we had a lot of success at times when you draw exactly Heart into Royal Scion. So now we kind of have double the number of 3-mana Planeswalkers, right? And we didn't want to play too many of them because they don't do anything without other cards. Everything else naturally already has 3 power. We don't get to play Fable, which obviously has become, a borderline ubiquitous staple in the format because it doesn't make a 3-power creature. But every other card we're playing is close enough. I think Tenacious Underdog is probably the most speculative card here, but it is a 2-mana, 3-power card that does reward you for milling it away at times.
So you find that Tenacious Underdog does more on average than like a Scrap Heap Scrounger?
That was my thought process, is that it does. I don't know if that's true or not, but I like the ability to block.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because we have 5 Planeswalkers in the list. That literally is about as far as it went. It's like, in a pinch, I can block with it.
Yeah. I was playing Underdog in like this Jund Midrange deck a while back, and turn 2 Underdog felt fine, like in a way that turn 2 Scrap Heap Scrounger did not. Like, I felt like I was getting a real creature that I would attack or block with and get some value out of, whereas Scrap Heap Scrounger, like, a lot of the time you cast it and you just know your opponent is breathing a sigh of relief. They're like, I'm not worried about taking 3 damage, and that's not going to interact with my creatures unless I choose to block. So, yeah. Underdog, scrappy little card. Would be happy to see if it pulls its weight here.
Yeah, Bloodtide Harvester, is sort of a removal spell / 3/2 creature that can crew Heart. All these guys are really good bodies. If you just turn 2, it's very likely on turn 2 you'll be able to attack with one of your 3/2. So then Kaito is a very tempo positive play on turn 3. Right? Kaito's only good is what we've kind of found out when you're ahead. So we have all these turn 2 drops that let us attack hopefully pretty freely. If not, Royal Scions is actually a huge beating, right? Like, Royal Scions make Heart of Kiran a creature, attack for 6 in the air, and then I'm left with a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. If we're on the play, we're just so far ahead at that point, right? It's hard. They have to attack Royal Scions with a bunch of cards to get through it, to kill it. I have a Heart of Kiran back to block. Giving Bloodtide Harvester or Tenacious Underdog +2/+0 and First Strike and Trample is very powerful. Making your Graveyard Trespasser able to attack, into stuff is very important. I've found it getting brick walled a lot by mono green. Right, you play your Trespasser, it seems like it's good in these mid-range beers. They play a 4/4 creature for 3 mana on their turn 2. You can't even attack with your Trespasser a lot of times. You can't threaten their Planeswalkers. Heart of Kiran flies over their 3 mana 4/4. Royal Scions buffs all your 2 and 3 mana creatures so that they actually profitably exchange with all of the 3 mana creatures from green. And then giving First Strike means you win all the attacks. So if you're playing against red-black, they don't have profitable blocks.
The last card that really jumps out is you have a 1/of Rielle the Everwise in your 3 slot. Rielle is legendary creature *3, right? Where her power of Rielle is equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. So its base stats range from, Sylvan Curie to actually a decent amount of damage whenever Rielle connects. So I could see +2ing or +1ing rather the Royal Scions on Rielle to get a good chunk of damage in. But what about that second ability, right? Whenever you discard for the first time each turn, Rielle lets you draw that many cards. So how much support is in here? We have the blood tokens from Bloodtide Harvester, we have Kaito, and we have Royal Scions. So it's actually a fair amount. This is a really interesting inclusion here, right? I hope that this pans out for you, because if Rielle can just pull her weight in a deck that is not a dedicated, draw discard deck, or not even a dedicated Rielle deck, but as a 1/of, that's pretty cool.
Also, just a reminder, so Kenzin, if you want to play Otawara, these cards all work with Rielle. You don't think about it, but any channel effect.
Okay, I did not realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize it until the first time I did it, and then I bounced something, the Grease Fang to not die, and then I drew a card. I was like, oh man, that's insane. What the hell? Not only am I not dying, I'm drawing a card. So yeah, it started out as a 2/of, and I was playing a bunch more 3 mana Planeswalkers, but I thought I had to be a little bit more responsible. I was like, all right, start with 1, play the full suite of Bone Crusher, which is kind of mediocre against a lot of decks, but it's never bad. And just see how much it comes up, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so those are two Grixis lists from David that are not going too heavy on the new cards, but we would be remiss if we did not at least talk about Corpse Appraiser. That, I think, has been the standout Grixis or Maestros card from the set. I'm not ready to call it a staple of Pioneer yet, but you will routinely see Grixis lists now in the 5.0s playing as many as 4 copies of Corpse Appraiser. Corpse Appraiser is 3/3 Vampire Rogue for Grixis mana, that is blue, black, red. When it enters a battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature card from any graveyard, and then if you do that, you get to cast a strategic planning. That is, you look at your top 3 cards, 1 to your hand, 2 to the graveyard, potentially setting up your next Corpse Appraiser.
Yeah, so this is a card that a whole suite of pros played in like a Grixis Vampires list in Standard. I think that encouraged people to start exploring in Pioneer, and there have been 5.0s with Grixis Vampires lists. You've kind of highlighted a couple of them here. And then DJeffWx from our Discord has been playing basically just like mono removal Grixis for Corpse Appraiser. And so you have all these ways to put a creature in your opponent's graveyard by turn 3, right? You've got 1 Bloodchief's Thirst, 4 Fatal Push, 1 Strangle, 4 Thoughtseize, which can take a creature, 3 Drown in the Lock, 2 Dreadbore, Kroxa can make them discard a creature, and then the Stomp half of Bonecrusher Giant. And if you play against creature decks, this card is just so good, right? Or if your opponent like kind of foolishly discards a Phoenix a little too early. The ceiling on this card is so high, right? Let's assume your mana is perfect. You play your 3 mana 3/3, it casts, a Super Ponder or whatever the hell you want to call it, and the body is reasonable. Like I said, I've started to find like 3/3s are actually getting outsized pretty commonly, but in mid-range matchups, it's actually fine, right? It just trades with their Trespasser. It blocks their Fable token. So, yeah, I think this card is like a very polarizing card. I think it's awesome against creature decks, and I think it's bad against everything. Well, obviously, it's bad against decks that don't have creatures.
Yeah, so DJeffWx has been doing great with this deck. I think they have 3 trophies and a bunch of 4/1s in the last few weeks. Just looking at the list that they're playing most recently, you look at it and it's like, this is just Rakdos, right? It's got Blood Ties, it's got Fables, Bonecrusher, Fatal Push Thoughtseize. So what's the pull into blue? Corpse Appraiser here is a 4-of that's basically replacing Graveyard Trespasser, saying, hey, we believe in Corpse Appraiser more than Trespasser. Then, because we've done the work of making our mana base produce blue, and there's, I think, 4 copies of Xander's Lounge to support that, well, we're going to reliably have blue, so let's also play Drown in the Lock, standout card, even though it's like not always on like it is in Modern. Like, it's on enough that this split card counterspell Terminate is super powerful. And then the last blue card in the main is Nicol Bolas the Ravager. This is the 4-mana Nicol Bolas 4/4 flying creature that's a Ravenous Rat. Now, it also flips to a Planeswalker on the back, but what DJeff has found is that basically you just never flip it, right? Its role is to close the game, and it's good enough at that role. Just giving you card advantage, board presence, and attacking a few times. Not to say that it never flips, but that's like not why it's here.
Yeah, I think decks that want it to flip often play like 4-mana Chandra, right? They can give you the boost the extra mana to get up to that 7. But this list is trying to, kill your opponent's creatures. You build up your board state, in a card positive way. Blood Tithe, Harvester, and the Appraiser and Fable all sort of put creatures on the board and give you some type of value back. And then, yeah, it's just beatdown time. Like, your opponent's down a couple cards, and you've got a bunch of 3/3s and 4/3s and 3/2s and 4/4 flyings, and you just get in there.
Yeah, so I think there's like maybe room to iterate on this list. I know DJeff is testing an Angrath, the Flame Chained, in the 5 slot right now instead of the 3rd copy of Nicol Bolas. LAA11 in our Discord has also been interested in this, and they've proposed like a Yorion version going up to 80 cards because a lot of these effects benefit from blinking. Corpse Appraiser has an ETB, so does Blood Tithe Harvester. LA11 is saying, okay, if I'm going to do that, maybe I want to add like Omen of the Seas, maybe I want to add Trial of Ambitions. So like, there's still concepts to work out there, but I mean, LAA11 is the player who probably single-handedly put Blood Tithe Harvester on the map in Pioneer. So I will trust their findings if they can arrive at a good Yorion version of this Grixis Corpse Appraiser list.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you start talking about Uriah, then Fires of Invention gets very interesting. Fires of Invention has a lot of synergy with Corpse Appraiser and Nikki B, right? Like, you can play Nikki B for free, maybe flip it that same turn. Corpse Appraiser, anytime you're like adding to the board and then you're drawing another card, you can maybe play for free that same turn. You just have a bunch of super tempo positive plays with Fires of Invention and some of these cards that replace themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing that Corpse Appraiser does, it is a vampire. So we've seen like a new style of Grixis vampires, where Corpse Appraiser is like your featured 3-drop. You have Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, super powerful Planeswalker, and Bloodtithe Harvester, format staple that, I mean, this card might even be good enough for Modern, I'm not sure. So once you have Bloodtithe and Corpse Appraiser as your kind of featured vampires, you have to start to rethink everything, right? So I think the more popular version of Grixis Vampires now still plays Gifted Aetherborns and Kalidas, no longer plays Knight of the Ebon Legion, no longer plays Dusk Legion Zealot, and they've actually replaced Champion of Dusk at 5 mana with Evelyn the Covetous, a really interesting new card. 2/5 flying for 5. When Evelyn or any other vampire enters the battlefield under your control, you get kind of that Tybalt effect, where you and your opponents each exile their top cards, and then you're allowed to cast those cards.
Yeah, the Vampires deck is... I have not seen it much, but it seems like there's like a 1 in almost every 5/0 jump in Pioneer now. So it's definitely like a list, right, that has had some staying power. All these lists are functionally Fatal Push Thoughtseize lists, right? And then like what do you want your value plays to be? Honestly, it's Fatal Push, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Fable, right? I mean, those are the 12. These lists are not aggressive. They're functionally the only mid-range lists that exist. Start with those 12 cards. What do you want to build around them? The Vampires list, I think, has the ability to go way over the top. Evelyn dodges tons of commonly played removal. Push being dodged, and all the 4 damage sources that are out everywhere. 5 toughness on a black creature, as we've talked about before, is just huge. So I like her actually as your top end over the other one. I think the ability to just go way over the top if they can't kill her, right? Your opponent maybe has 2 Dreadbores or something. If you're thinking of a mid-range matchup, if they don't draw that, you never block with Evelyn. If they don't draw it right away, like you're just about to go up like a zillion cards, and then what? They're playing some joke like me, he's playing Graveyard Trespasser, like, okay, resolves, my turn.
So is it fair to say that there's like no incentive to play aggro anymore? Like Knight of the Ebon Legion is not even an attractive card in these decks?
I think there's no incentive to play aggro in a disruptive way, because I think the best disruptive aggro cards are all actually white creatures. So the disruptive aggro deck is humans, or the human variants, or I actually love the Esper list that we built around the 1/4 ward connive dude. I'm spacing on the name.
Rafine, Scheming Seer.
Rafine. I love that. I love that list. I think that's the disruptive aggro list. I think these lists have correctly recognized that the power level goes up if you make your mana a little worse. There is no red-black fast land, so you don't get paid off for splashing at all, and I don't think black has enough tools. Other than the 2 1-mana spells, I actually think black is the worst color in the format by a lot. And I don't even think Fatal Push tends to be very good in these mono black lists because they have no way to turn it on. So adding red is almost necessary, because Fable lets you loot away the Thoughtseizes that are bad or the pushes that are bad, and then it always turns on your push because you get a treasure. So like that combo is the key. And once you add red, you're going to be slow. So I think what they've realized is like red-black midrange is nothing special. It plays a bunch of crappy cards. It's just a bunch of like doofy 3-drops. Why not play 3-drops that have like way higher upside? Like, I think the average value maybe of Graveyard Trespasser is a little better than Corpse Appraiser, but when Corpse Appraiser is really good, it's way better than Graveyard Trespasser, right? It just has a lower floor and a higher ceiling. So I think people are just like, why not just high roll, crush all the aggro matchups, and then I'll fix the combo, everything else in the sideboard, and maybe I'll just go over the top of other mid-range decks. And I think we're seeing from the success of Jeff and some of these vampire players that's a very reasonable thing to be doing in the format.
Yeah, well said. All right, anything else for Grixis or the Maestros?
I'm excited to try to get some sweet screenshots of me just beating people down with the 4/4 vehicle. Just running over spirits. Like, what is Mono Blue going to do?
I do love Heart of Kiran. I've been let down many a time by it, but I mean, who knows? Maybe this is the deck, against all odds, a Grixis semi-aggro Heart of Kiran deck. So let's shift gears. We've paid enough respects to New Capenna here. Let's just go way back in time. It's a free-for-all here, and let's just pick out a few of the favorites. David, you've been brewing with some wild stuff lately. Off syllabus, we might say.
Yeah.
And I just want to hear about some of these decks.
Yeah, so I get really intrigued by certain like card combinations, and I just feel like there has to be something there, and so I just start like building lists around them. So we played a lot with Extraction Specialists, and I think we found the card was just like on generic power levels just super good. We've seen humans adopt it in various builds in Pioneer and Modern. A card that on basically like flat rate is good enough for Modern like really opens my eyes. Like, wow, this card has to be awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen like for Fable, right? It seemed like all right, it was kind of gimmicky. It only worked with Winota. Then it's like people in Modern are just playing it. It's like this card is way, you were on this card way before I was. Like Fable's just a way better card than we realized. So it's like, okay, Extraction Specialist is really good with Charming Prince, but I wanted like something else. So Charming Prince is really good with Humble Defector, which is a strange interaction. So Humble Defector is 1 and a red for a 2/1, draw 2 cards. Target opponent gains control of Humble Defector, and you can only activate Humble Defector on your turn. Charming Prince is very strange text that says you actually exile a creature that you own, not that you control. So you don't have to do it in response. You have to, vial it in with other vial or something in response to activating Humble Defector. You can just activate Humble Defector, give it to your opponent, cast Charming Prince. It can be one of the 2 cards you draw off your Humble Defector if you're a believer. Then you get it back. The outcome of that is that you get 2 2-power creatures that each drew a card when they came into play. There is not a single 2-mana 2/2 in the entire format of Pioneer that is a 2-mana 2/2 draw. So you're like, it seems like you're going to a lot of work. You're going to a lot of work to get an outcome that no other card exists. So you're getting 2 of these cards that are in theory too powerful for Pioneer, right? They would not print a 2-mana 2/2 that just cycles. Or maybe they would, I don't know.
No, I think Humble Defector is like so powerful that, yeah, it has to have this crazy drawback. Like, yeah, you just never see this card played. I think that the last time we tried to play Humble Defector, one of the conclusions, which was very depressing, was that opponents would eventually wise up and figure out that if you're playing Humble Defector, you must have a plan for it, so they should just kill it right away.
Yes, exactly.
Because it doesn't have haste, right? So you've done all this work, crafted the perfect brew to take advantage of the Defector, and then it just dies to removal every time. So Extraction Specialist is now like very, very intriguing to me. Like, all right, now I've done the work of building a Humble Defector deck, and I can get back the Defector once it dies, and my Extraction Specialist happens to synergize already with the Prince Charming. So like this little 3-way of synergy and value is, I want to get in on that.
Yeah, and the Extraction Specialist, conditions is like, all right, the Defector can't attack or block. It's like, sweet. I did not want to attack or block this. I want to draw 2 freaking cards, man. Let's go. So yeah, all that works very well in theory, right? So those are the 12 cards, right? I was like, all right. We've seen like play 2-drop, force our opponent to kill it, Extraction Specialist it back. That's been a thing that's been good enough. Extraction Specialist having lifelink is good against humans. It trades very positively against removal heavy decks. We just talked about a bunch of sort of mono removal decks. Trades with Corpse Appraiser, they both functionally drew a card, but ours is actually on the board, right? So it's actually like a tempo positive exchange with cards like Bone Crusher Giant, Corpse Appraiser, Graveyard Trespasser. Blocks all kinds of humans. In the late game, all our Charming Princes are in the graveyard. Extraction Specialist is a army in a can. The question that you point out is like, okay, we have 1 card that works with Humble Defector, Charming Prince. What's another card we can play? Mm-hmm. Touch the Spirit Realm is interesting to me. Touch the Spirit Realm, 2 and a white. Enchantment, exile target creature or artifact until Touch the Spirit Realm leaves play. Or 1 and a white, channel it, functionally blink a permanent. Again, does not have to be a permanent you control, so you can draw the Touch the Spirit Realm after you've activated your Humble Defector. Also, Extraction Specialist is a card we would love to blink, right? So we can touch the Spirit Realm and Extraction Specialist in play. Extraction Specialist comes back, gets something back from the graveyard. So now we have a bunch of cards that kind of work well together, and then the question is like, how do we turn this into value? So I'm playing a bunch of cheap 1-mana interaction, Portable Hole, Strangle, just trade 1 card for 1 card. 4 Luminarch Aspirant, again, another 2-drop that they're heavily encouraged to kill on turn 2 that turns our Extraction Specialist into something valuable. I'm playing 4 Bone Crusher Giant. They're super medium, but what can you do? And then Fable of the Mirror Breaker. The one disappointment with Fable of the Mirror Breaker is there is an existing bug. I don't know if they fixed it in the last update, but the flipped Fable targeting Humble Defector makes a token that never dies.
No, what?
Yeah, it copies Humble Defector. You get to tap it, draw 2, give it to your opponent. In theory, it's supposed to die at the end of turn, right? That's super sweet. 1 mana, draw 2 for the rest of the game.
That'd be amazing.
Your opponent just untaps with the token. The trigger goes on the stack to sacrifice at the end of your turn, but it does not force your opponent to sacrifice the token.
Oh,
so
come on. Come on.
Yeah, it's tough.
So looking at Touch the Spirit Realm right now, I actually did not realize that the channel ability could target your opponent's stuff. I knew that the front side was intended to be used as like Oblivion Ring, but I've only seen the channel used to like, blink your Ephemerate, blink your Solitude or Grief. But yeah, the fact that you can actually draw towards that later does make it like a little bit less risky to just blind activate the Humble Defector and assume you will eventually draw a blink effect.
Yeah, it also is, if you want to think of it, like it's an instant speed way to blink Greasefang, which I've done. Like it only buys you a turn, but now Greasefang is actually in play, so it can just die to Strangle, for instance.
Oh, okay. So it actually blinks it until the end step.
Yep.
Very nice. Okay. Yeah, so you actually tested this list.
Yeah, I went 2-3. I lost one match because of the Fable interaction. This is actually like a modified list. I found I was way up on cards. I just needed a way to turn it into value. So I added Luminarch Aspirants, again, to just give me a little more closing speed. Again, I want a 2-drop that forces them to interact. And then I increased my 1 mana interaction, Portable Hole and Strangle, just because I need to turn all the cards in my hand into some kind of value on the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's a Boros version of Charming Prince, Extraction Specialist, Humble Defector. That little package could, in theory, go into other decks, right? So you actually have another version here to propose.
Yeah, so I was like, if I'm up on cards, what's the best way to actually turn that into interaction? And black is the best way, right? We have all these ways that we're like blinking permanents and stuff, so push is actually amazing. And then sometimes against, like, again, slower decks, mid-range decks, Thoughtseize is good. Another way to, again, turn a card into a card immediately. Claim the Firstborn actually has a sweet interaction with Humble Defector. So if it's your turn, let's say it's your turn 3. I play Humble Defector, my opponent plays whatever, Thing in the Ice. I choose not to be afraid of Thing in the Ice. I tap Humble Defector, give it to my opponent, draw 2. Claim the Firstborn, my own Humble Defector. It untaps, comes back to my control. I tap it again, draw 2, give it back to them. Then I cast Charming Prince and blink it back. So I've just gone up a zillion cards. So Claim the Firstborn, obviously great with Village Rites, so we're playing that little like combo. It's also great with, I'm playing a Butcher of the Horde as a cool sacrifice effect that also, again, I'm trying to find a way to like end the game once I'm up all these cards.
Oh, wow.
But it also works with Humble Defector. It's a 1 mana draw 2 if Humble Defector's in play, which is super sweet.
Butcher of the Hordes is like the Mardu Siege right now. You don't see it very often, but it is a free sacrifice outlet and a closer at the same time.
Yeah, so like if you just imagine I play Humble Defector on 2, they stomp it. I play Extraction Specialist, get back Humble Defector, they play some 3-drop. They play Fable, let's say. I play Butcher, activate Humble Defector with that trigger on the stack, sack it, give Butcher of the Horde haste, and I attack for 8 power, and I have a full hand. I've replaced every card I've played.
That's sweet. Have you tried this deck yet? This looks awesome.
No, I haven't. I'm still debating, like, I have these 2 Fables in the deck. Again, I was totally wrong about the card. It's way more powerful than I thought. Being able to copy Extraction Specialist with the flipped Fable is insane. Being able to copy a Butcher of the Horde that comes into play is insane. But I don't know if the bug is fixed. So I don't know if I have the heart to like go out there like, all right, in theory I should copy this Humble Defector and draw 2. But yeah, in general, I like the look of this list more. I just like having super efficient 1 mana removal because Humble Defector gives you all these cards, right? And you're kind of going to a lot of work to fill your hand up with stuff, and then you just need to turn it into something. And so the way to do that is to play super efficient 1 mana spells. So now we have 16 1 mana spells, often that are trading a card for card very efficiently. And the mana isn't so bad, right? Because we have both fast lands.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing you don't want to do with Humble Defector is, if the big payoff is to draw extra cards, you don't want to degrade your own card quality so far that you actually can't even win drawing extra cards. And there's a risk of that if you're your main plan is like attack with Luminarch Aspirants and hope the opponent gives up. That might work or it might not. Whereas, Thoughtseize and Push, you can at least rely on these to disrupt the opponents, and you have a lot of removal in this black version, plus more closing power from the Butchers.
Right. And like Village Rites is a fine card. Again, you can activate Humble Defector, sack it with your Village Rites. Then we're playing Young Pyromancer. That gives us fodder for Village Rites. And then Claim the Firstborn gets attracted because we have these sacrifice effects, including Butcher the Horde, which can sacrifice Humble Defector, 1/1 tokens we get from Young Pyromancer, or cards we're taking from our opponent with Claim the Firstborn, or like a Claim the Prince that can't, a Charming Prince that can't attack or block, if it's brought back by Extraction Specialist or something like that. So again, it's that sort of all these cards have slight synergies with each other, right? And the theory is that hopefully they blend together into a nice creamy package.
So looking at these two lists, man, I got really nostalgic for Flicker Wisp. That would be like the perfect Pioneer level card. It's not too powerful. It'd be great in Pioneer, like pretty interesting and fair, I think. But if you want to do that, right, if you want to have more copies of the Charming Prince rescue effect, you have to go to Modern, where we've actually done this before. Like I think one of the first cards from Eldraine we did quickly identified Charming Prince as one of the top 3 cards from Eldraine to brew with first. And we had some pretty interesting lists. Like you had drawn up a Humble Defector list that used Dubious Challenge.
That list was sweet. I just missed a 5-0. That was one of my like big regrets. I just missed a 5-0 the first time we played it, and then I never got that close again. And I don't think anyone ever 5-0'd with this particular shell. It's like, man, I feel like if you 5-0 once with some of these weird shells, I feel like 50 people just get inspired to like work on it, and then they like improve it, and then it maybe turns into a real deck, and it just never happened.
So a little trip down memory lane here. People don't know what we're talking about. Dubious Challenge. It's kind of like Collected Company if you squint it.
It's a lot like Collecting Company.
3 and a green, sorcery. Look at your top 10 cards of your library. Exile up to 2 creature cards from among them. Target opponent chooses one of the exiled creatures and puts it onto the battlefield under their control, and then you get the rest. So what you want to do is you want to cast Dubious Challenge, and then in your top 10, you want to find Emrakul plus Flicker Wisp, or Emrakul plus Charming Prince, the 15 mana Emrakul. That way, whatever they choose, right, they can choose the Emrakul, then you'll get the Charming Prince and blink the Emrakul. Same thing with Flicker Wisp. So they actually just have to like take the Flicker Wisp themselves and give you the Emrakul. Mathematically, that's not going to happen every time, so you have to play like slightly worse creatures. You have to play like also some World's Biome Worms, also some Woodfall Primus, and in order to like make the numbers work out, we've got like a Glimmerpoint Stag here, we've got a Tristania Discordant. You had the idea to put in Through the Breach as like a backup way to make your fatties like do something for you, so you have 3 copies of Through the Breach as well.
And we had the 4 Arbor Elf, 4 Utopia Sprawl package, so we could actually do it quite early. So they're actually encouraged to keep in their cheap removal to stop the Arbor Elf from going off.
Exactly. And what made this really spicy was like, okay, you actually found room for 4 Humble Defectors because you have both Charming Prince and Flicker Wisp. So now you have like this whole other thing going on of like, I'm going to blink my Defector while also building towards this rather dubious endgame. So you could, in theory, like add Extraction Specialists to this list. It might come at the expense of like Through the Breach, or maybe you don't trust Arbor Elf anymore and just want to play like a slower build. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that sucks is Solitude is one of the reasons why we don't see a lot of Through the Breach anymore, period. We don't see Blue-Red Through the Breach or anything else. And I think it's chalked up to Solitude. And Solitude does not fit well in our deck because it would just, if our opponent got it, they'd mess us up with it. And if they just have it in their hand, right, a turn 3 Emrakul, it's not what it used to be. If you're not casting it on turn 3 with that free turn, it's probably just going to give you 15 life.
Yeah, Emrakul Pass is like not viable in Modern anymore. Solitude, even Otawara, like the decks that don't have Solitude have Otawara, so it's like, okay. All right.
Yep.
So much for that. However, the other home for Humble Defector that we also were playing in that Charming Prince week was just like Death and Taxes. And it seems like you could, in theory, add Extraction Specialist to that list, right? I'm just looking at a 5-0 Death and Taxes list from last week. It has 2 Charming Prince and 2 Extraction Specialist. So if I wanted to play Humble Defector, what would I have to give up? And basically, my conclusion is there's two ways to do it. One is you cut some disruption. So like in this 5-0 list from Charon's Obol, I could cut Leonin Arbiter and like Archon of Emeria. That will give me enough room in the deck to play 4 Humble Defectors, go up to 4 Charming Prince, and like maybe add a Flicker Wisp. Alternately, I could cut the Stoneforge package. There's a Stoneforge and 3 equipment. That's 7 cards. That gives me room for the Humble Defectors and, more of the Charming Prince / Flicker Wisp.
Yeah, I mean, Leonin Arbiter is just terrible. It was terrible 6 years ago when I played it at multiple GPs. It cannot be better now. I'm stunned people are still playing this card, so I know what I would want to cut.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it might be worth trying. I'm tempted to try this. The big draw is Extraction Specialist, right? Like, if that is a card that we've concluded is good enough, and that already synergizes with Charming Prince, right? I mean, the logic still works in Modern. It's just like, is the surrounding shell going to keep up? And here you do get Solitudes. So 4 Solitudes and Death and Taxes makes perfect sense, and that rewards me even further for having Charming Prince and Flicker Wisp.
It would kind of make me want to play, maybe tweak out, again, I don't know how feasible this is, but I'd at least consider building a Solitude, Flicker Wisp, whatever, with the 1 white, the Ephemerate package. Like, Ephemerate is great with Solitude. It's okay with Flicker Wisp and some of these other cards. And then it's awesome with the 2/1. Like, the first time you activate it, you just, whatever, draw 2, blink it in response, and then next turn, whatever, flash in Solitude with the trigger on the stack, or Violent, something else. I'd at least want to look at what that list would look like. So, again, it would be way less disruptive. We wouldn't play Thalia, obviously, in that list. But drawing extra cards just matters a lot more if you have a bunch of free elementals to play. Like, you just get the tempo back so quickly. And if you're playing Ephemerate anyway, then, like, flashing in Solitude is super attractive or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we've seen Mold Drifter used for that effect in, like, Esper versions of that deck. But that's, like, a little slower, so I'm not sure. All right, that's a little Humble Defector detour, but I mean, we love this card. It's
it's beautiful,
amazing card.
Yes.
All right, David. Anything else that you've been working on that you want to talk about? I mean, you've been playing some wild stuff lately.
Yeah, so I built a blue-red list. Damon was really sad because he was getting ready for this Pioneer RCQ, and he loved the blue-red control shell in Pioneer. That was playing, 3 or 4 Narsets and some number of collective Defiances. And so obviously Collective Defiance is a fine card, right? It can be just a 3-mana sorcery speed removal spell, but it can also, if you, Narset on 3, your opponent doesn't kill it, I can Collective Defiance target you, and, you lose all the cards in your hand except for 1 because of Narset's static ability. So I was like, okay, let's see what we can do with that. So 3 Narset, 3 Collective Defiance seems reasonable enough. I was really interested in playing Rielle because Rielle lets you, if I don't have Narset in play, my opponent kills it, or, there's a lot of aggression, right? Narset just dies. I can play Rielle, target myself with Collective Defiance. So, like, 4 mana, kill your creature. Let's say I have 3 cards in my hand after I cast that. Discard 3, draw 3, and then draw 3 again for Rielle. So it's like a 4 mana concentrate that kills a creature. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just a crazy, crazy card. And then I wanted to try out Rielle with Ledger Shredder, because if you imagine a world where you leave up 2 mana on turn 2 for your Censor or whatever, say I cast Censor on your 3-drop, I cast Ledger Shredder plus a 1-drop on turn 3, draw and discard, and then turn 4 I cast Rielle, cast another card, then Ledger Shredder loots for free. I'm not casting any looting spells. I'm just casting my normal Consider, Strangle, etc. Then Rielle triggers. So you actually start going up a ton of cards off of your Ledger Shredder. So I was just interested in seeing like how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah, I mean, ever since Ledger Shredder, we're now in the age where incidental looting is like a realistic plan, right? You're not playing a single card, I mean, unless you count Izzet Charm, that like is only here to loot. But even Izzet Charm is like fine.
Oh yeah, I countered Collected Company with it. I, shocked some random the 3/2 vampire that makes it blood. I mean, it's not awesome, but it does, it does a thing.
So you end up with an Izzet deck that's playing 3 Rielle the Everwise, and your discard effects are Censor, Ledger Shredder, Collective Defiance, and Izzet Charm.
Yeah. Yep. So, and again, Odawara and Sokenzen.
That's true, yes.
So we're playing 2 Otawara, so we get to actually like sneak an extra land in there.
Made cheaper by Rielle, of course.
Yeah, no, Otawara plus Rielle was awesome. I was stunned by how amazing that is. 3 mana, bounce anything, draw a card is like better than a kicked into the Royal. Because you can bounce almost anything. It was crazy how good that was.
All right, so how did this deck do for you?
First league I played, I 4-1'd, and it felt really smooth. Like I played a handful of decks where the Narset collected Defiance interaction was very good. My sideboard plan was pretty solid. And then the second league, I think I went 2-3, and it felt very clunky. And it felt like the cards I had were not quite lining up well. The Treasure Cruise, they would still attack my graveyard, even though it wasn't good to do so. Like I added a Treasure Cruise from my first list. It was very bad, but I think it was just random chance. My opponent just kind of had the right removal at the right time. I was missing land drops, so it feels like the truth of the shell is somewhere between those two. I think I need to monkey around with it a little more. I don't think Bone Crusher Giant is what I want. I don't know what I want, but I don't think it's Bone Crusher Giant. I found the card to be very underwhelming. It's only good in mid-range matchups specifically, right? It kills the front half of Fable, and then it's a blocker, right? That's a nice interaction. But against like blue-red, it has no targets, right? They're playing Shredder. Killing Phoenix is just terrible. It doesn't kill Thing in the Ice. It's so slow. So I think I need to go back in the lab and find a bunch more cards that are much more efficient to see what I can do there.
I mean, would Fable be a consideration? Like, that's never bad. It loots some of the time.
Yeah, I think at first I was thinking like Fable plus Rielle is like way too slow, but so, I mean, Fable's fine, I think, without doing any of the other stuff. I do think I should just play for Fable and just like lean into it.
All right, well, if you do get to test that, I'm excited to see how that goes.
But yeah, Rielle plus target yourself with Collective Defiance is awesome. Narset plus target them with Collective Defiance is awesome. So there's something there for sure. I don't know what it is, but it's beautiful.
I love that. All right, so that is Rielle the Everwise, little blast from the past, but not nearly as far back as this next deck here. We were talking about some card, I forgot what it was, and you're like, oh yeah, I wanted to play Sidisi Brood Tyrant, and I was, that perfectly fits. And like, you say Sidisi Brood Tyrant? Like, what? And yeah, you were dead serious. You have a list here with 4 copies of Sidisi Brood Tyrant, all the way back from Kamigawa. This is 4 mana for a 3/3 Naga Wizard. Whenever it ETBs or attacks, you mill yourself for 3, and then you get a zombie. You get a 2/2 zombie, assuming you hit a creature when you did that.
Yeah, so the card that triggered it for me actually was Liliana of the Last Hope. It's a card that you don't see people play very much, but I actually think it's pretty good against mono green, and it's pretty good against spirits. It's just like a proactive thing to do. It's a planeswalker they have to attack. Often it can plus to actually kill a creature, because there were, at the time, mono green was very dominant. This is a couple weeks ago. So if you just like kill their first creature on the play, then by the time they cast their like second elf, your Liliana resolves and kills it. And then it just, eventually ultimates, and it's hard for them to beat that. So I was like, oh, well, that's actually kind of cute with Sidisi, because then the -2 can actually like make a zombie or fill up your graveyard and then find the creature that you want. And I wanted to try out Tasigur, because it's like, all right, Delve is broken, blah, blah, blah. Should the blue Delve spells be broken? It's like, well, Tasigur was the card in Standard that saw a ton of play. Is that any good? Then I kind of had to like fill out my deck with enough creatures. And then I was thinking, the 5 mana Liliana Death's Majesty, her plus is actually great with Sidisi in play. So this is a deck that kind of takes advantage of the graveyard, but isn't, like if people are playing Hearse as a graveyard hate card, like if they bring it in against you, like Sidisi still triggers, and Liliana +2s to make a zombie, and then it mills 2. So she can +2 to make 2 zombies as a 5 mana planeswalker if Sidisi's already in play. Like, that's really good. And they both, Sidisi attacking and Liliana plussing, moves towards finding Titan, which eventually you could just Liliana into play, right? So I was basically building like my classic like Sultai mid-range list that kind of has the out to go way over the top, because it can find Titan of Industry over the course of a couple turns and then play it for much less than 7 mana. And then the fallback plan is like play Tasigur, which is a 5 toughness black creature that we've talked about, to like double spell, right? You get to like cast an Old Rutstein, cast Tasigur on turn 4, or something like that, where you're making very tempo positive play.
Every time you propose a list with Liliana Death's Majesty, I feel like I'm reading the card for the first time. Like, I had no idea this mills 2 cards. So the +1 makes a zombie and mills 2, and then the -3 is your zombify effect.
Yeah, so if you're just staring at each other, like, I played Black-Red a bunch of times and just crushed it with this list. It's like, you have a Sidisi in play, they play whatever. Fable, right? Awesome card. Then I play Liliana plus her, just make 2 zombies. Like, we're just staring at each other, but Liliana's just upticking to eventually finding Titan. Like, I'm just faux tutoring for it almost. And like, every time I attack with Sidisi, or every time an upkeep happens with Old Rutstein in play, or Liliana minuses, I just have a certain % chance to find a Titan.
So you got to try this. I mean, how good was Sidisi?
She's really good in mid-range mirror. So if you think you're going to play a lot of red-black, if you're going to play a bunch of these like vampire people or corpse appraiser or any of that kind of stuff, she's really good. But she's not good against the polar opposites of the field. So I went 3-2 twice, lost to mono green twice, and blue-white control and spirits. So I went 6-4 and just beat up on humans and red-black, Grixis, Esper Greasefang. And then I trotted it out the other night and went 0-2-0-4. I lost a blue-white control and Counterman 11 playing like mono-red Embercleave, and was just like, all right, I'm off it. So still have technically a winning record. Or no, I think I'm 6-6, I guess then, but was 6-4 in 2 leagues. And then just so frustrating. Like, you just open out against blue-white. You know, you keep a reasonable hand, but it doesn't have Thoughtseize, and you just can't win, right? With these mid-range decks against blue-white, they just beat you. But you have to play all this removal because there's all these mid-range other decks and aggro decks to play. So just kind of the mid-range brewer's dilemma. I think the real struggle with this deck is like how mediocre Tasigur is, and I don't know that there's anything to be done about it.
Mediocre in the sense that you're relying on Tasigur to be your other powerful thing, and it's just not doing that? Or
yeah, exactly. Like, I play Tasigur in multiple of these games. It's not enough of a clock against like spirits or anything like that. It is a fine card in mid-range matchups, again, because they're relying on push and strangle. Like, Tasigur's awesome there. But it's not good against any of the it's not good against spirits, and it's not good against blue-white, and it's not good against mono-green. And then its ability, like, in theory, is card advantage, but not really, because they just give you, you know, is Thoughtseize bad? Okay, that's what you get. Or is push bad? Like, it doesn't actually gain anything. I've activated it a zillion times and never gotten the card that I wanted.
Yeah, it reminds me of your old, like, Titan's Nest decks.
Yeah, the thing that I liked about this list is a list that really does use the graveyard, but like almost punishes your opponent. Like, if you bring in Hearse against this deck, it's not good. Like, Sidisi and Liliana just function fine without Hearse. Like, you've brought in this quote-unquote cyborg card that's supposed to be a trump in these matchups, and it doesn't do anything. I just like make an army of 2/2s and just get to 7 mana and cast Titan.
Got Old Rutstein and Sylvan Caryatid gradually getting your mana up to 7.
Yeah.
All right, well, I mean, 6-6, I'm going to call that a win. I would have predicted a much worse record for Sidisi Brood Tyrant, so color me impressed. Now, the last deck here is, again, in black-green colors, but instead of playing blue, you're dipping into red, and the big draw is Fires of Invention. So this is a totally different engine style. But Fires of Invention will let you double spell, and you'll be rewarded for that if you have massive card advantage and big mana sinks. And it's not immediately obvious to me, like, how to take advantage of that in Jund colors. But I feel like the list that you've put together here actually solves that in a really interesting way using cards from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty.
Yeah, so we had played a bunch of Grixis Fires of Invention Invoke, but once they banned Expressive Iteration, you had a hard time playing enough mana sources and then having enough card advantage to not flood, right? So Expressive Iteration was nice early and made sure you hit your fires on 4, but then it was a nice card to keep like the juice flowing late in the game to find your Invoke Despair. So Rhett, who is a friend of the pod, said he'd been monkeying around with a shell like this on Explorer, and the interaction is Shigeki, Jukai Visionary.
You got to read this one. This is a reader.
Yeah, so 1 in a green, 1/3 legendary enchantment creature. So 1 and a green, tap it, return it to your hand. You look at your top 4, and you may put a land into play tapped. So if you play it on turn 2, on turn 3 you can ramp, and then on the following turn, turn 4, you can have 5 mana and 5 lands in play, in theory. But the ability that we're interested in is channel. So green, green, XX, return X target non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. So what we're trying to do is get a Fires in play, get 6 mana basically, and then you just cast Invoke Despair, draw 2, cast another spell, then just Shigeki both of them back. And you just end up with this like incredible value engine, because Shigeki functions like Lear in the old Grixis list, where you just have a way to like keep churning Invoke Despair after Invoke Despair after Invoke Despair. And it's uncounterable, so there's nothing that they can do about it. The deck does not rely on graveyard for anything else, so it's like hard to bring in graveyard hate against a deck that's just trying to cast Fires of Invention. And then we just have a bunch of value hidden in our land slots. So we're playing 25 lands with 4 MDFCs, and then just basically like mid-range interactive spells.
Right, these are strong MDFCs, Hagra Mauling, Tangle Florahedron, the ramp. Yeah, Shigeki is like a lot of details here, right? Like that activated ability is straight up card advantage. It puts a land directly into play, and the cards that you didn't choose go to the graveyard. So they're actually like filling the graveyard for future copies of Shigeki.
Yes.
Now, the channel ability can't be countered. That's very important. But also it has that non-legendary clause. So you can't just like keep looping Shigeki forever. Unless you're willing to play something like what are cards that bring Shigeki back? You have the Takanuma here. You could play Gloom Shrieker.
You can play Culligan's Command.
You could play Balagad Recovery maybe if you wanted to.
Yeah. Yep. What I found though is like you activate a Shigeki with 6 mana in play, and then you like get an invoke and something else, or 2 invokes. Like you just don't need to do that many times. Your opponent's already dead. So our determination after playing 2 leagues is we did not want another card other than Takanuma specifically, which is, again, just a value land slot we'd play no matter what. Okay.
So Fires plus channel as your big like extra action seems very powerful, but was the end game good enough? Like how did the deck actually perform?
Oh yeah, we only lost when we kind of got like overrun. Like Spirits again is a difficult matchup. Fires is not good against Greasebang. So I think we went 4-1. Tweaked a few cards and then went 2-3. Again, it feels like something's there. This is the list we're looking at is a little tweaked. I added a Riveteer's Charm. That seemed like a cool like removal spell. That's also like a value engine in the late game. Celestis overperformed every time we cast it. So we had 1 Celestis, 1 Old Rutstein. Celestis just seemed better. Both this Shigeki list and the Sidisi list really took advantage of this Florahedron. Because what I noticed, against these like super tempo-y decks, the games where you actually get to turn 2 ramp against decks that don't kill creatures, so I'm talking about Mono Blue, I'm talking about most humans lists in game 1, playing the ramp spell out on 2 against them is so good. You get to cast your Fires earlier, or play double spell earlier. And then when it doesn't matter, like you don't want to cast Tangle Florahedron against Red-Black, right? You just want to hit all your land drops. Then it just comes into play tapped. You're choosing to play it slow. Red-Black's clock is super slow, right? They have a lot of powerful cards, but they won't kill you before turn 6 ever, right? They don't have the means to do so. So it's just a really nice place where it keeps your density of lands up, but then there's other times where we like had to invoke on turn 4 to not die, and Florahedron lets you do that, right? In the same way Celestis does.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then Hagra Mauling, again, typically a bad card, I think. But Fires just wants you, when you resolve Fires, to do something on 4. And this is just, no questions about it, always kills a creature that turn. So you just play Fires, you just have a 4-mana kill spell. And again, but it is a land in a pinch, not the end of the world.
Yes, these lists making me like appreciate the depth of Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty a little bit more. Like we never actually did a dedicated week on Invoke Despair, but I mean it's proving itself, right? Like you see it from time to time in Pioneer, you see it in Modern even. Shigeki, dominant card in Limited, but like, hey, I mean that interaction with Fires is like one of the more powerful things I can think of in terms of endgames. Like there's a lot of little stuff from Kamigawa that I'm glad we get to spend a little extra time with it here during this summer season.
Yeah, I think with a little bit of distance here, I think Neon Dynasty is one of the great sets they've ever made. It's just super deep. There's just a zillion powerful cards. I wish a few more of the sagas were good. Like Fable turned out to be much better than we thought. Again, except for you highlighted earlier. It's like a card that really does a lot. I feel like almost all the other sagas are just a little bit worse than we thought they'd be, but a bunch of other cards were just super useful and they encourage brew around. I just think it's a triumph. Mm-hmm. Had things worked out better, not that Wizards needs to schedule their set releases around our brewing podcast, but it would have been nice if we had the whole summer to work on Neon Dynasty as opposed to, in a way we have. I keep trying out Neon Dynasty cards. There's not that much depth in New Capenna. I actually think that this is one of the worst sets. It's more of a Strixhaven with a couple of interesting cards, and the overall themes don't have any resonance, and nobody knows who the hell Xander is, and no one like it didn't even really prompt 3-color decks to exist in
it's true
Standard. It didn't even do its thing. So like the most 3-colored card is the frickin' Hinata, which is from
that's from Neon Dynasty.
Yeah, which we 5-0'd with, right? Like, there's just a lot of cool Neon Dynasty stuff to play around with, and just huge win for Wizards. I think that was awesome in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I thought for sure we would at least do a week for each of the crime families, but when you look at them, like, there's not internal synergies to them. They don't suggest any decks. Like, so some of them have interesting cards, but like some don't, and there isn't like a Maestros deck or theme even. Like, Casualty is a mechanic, but like that's like a one-off mechanic you'll see on like one card.
Yeah, and like Connive is cool, but nothing like pays you off for conniving. It just randomly is looting. So just the cheapest card that had consistent connive on it is super playable. No other card with connive really matters. That's it. It's yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not a disaster. I heard that the limited format was also quite poor. It's just, a C+, and they've had a run of a bunch of B+, and I think that Neon Dynasty was an A+, so.
Yeah. Well said. All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us for today. Our next episode is going to be a wrap-up of our Ginny Fey testing month, and we will also be presenting a new slate of cards. So it's been a nice coincidence having the kickoff of these projects with Serum Visions be during the summer doldrums, as it were, because the brewers in our Discord have no shortage whatsoever of sweet cards to brew around from different eras of the game, and it's always sweet to see what people come up with. So tune in for that coming up next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care, David.
All right. Take care.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And tune in next time for the conclusion of Project Ginny Fey with Brian Madden and Arun Singh of the Serum Visions podcast. Support for this show is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.